Welcome everyone to Extra Life 2017 and thank you for tuning in to RackerGamers as we're here for 25 hours this year thanks to the time change to bring you some great gaming all for a great cause. And boy do we have a treat for you today. We are going to take a look back at Ms. Pacman, one of the all-time greats in arcade gaming, and have an interview with one of its creators, Steve Golson. Hey Steve, you almost done with that game?
Almost. Any minute now.
Let's take a look back at one of the original 1980s commercial for the Atari, Ms. Pacman.
Atari introduces the woman of the year, Ms. Pacman. With a style of entertainment that Pacman never knew, an endless supply of floating goodies, oranges, pretzels, 4 different screens, each with different exits and entrances, and the green screen so difficult to reach, you may never see it again.
Don't you know I'm more than Pacman with a phone?
Reach for Ms. Pacman.
Reach for Atari.
And as you saw a few moments ago, we were getting started with seeing Steve getting some Ms. Pacman gameplay in there. And we also have with us...
I'm Greg Hamburg. And I'm Chris Weeks.
You all met Steve Golson, and I'm Paul Ibarra. And so, Steve?
Yeah?
How are you enjoying your time here so far?
It's wonderful. It's good to see lots of people having a great excuse to play games.
We're glad to have you out.
Sure.
Chris, you want to kick things off?
Sure. Can you tell us actually the history you have in the video game industry? Where'd you get started?
Oh, that's a long story. Hope you have time.
No, we have 25 hours.
Yes, all right. We have 25 hours. How much can we fill? It goes back to 1978, really. And I was a student at MIT. I was at a dorm, living in a dorm called McGregor House, and there were several other students in the same suite as me, and 2 in particular, Doug McCrae and Kevin Curran. And cutting the long story a little bit shorter, the 2 of them started up a partnership to have originally pinball games in our dormitory. And it's a long story about why the previous vendor pulled out. But anyway, so Doug happened to have an old pinball game, and he brought it up. And the 2 of them started this partnership and they bought another game and bought another game and were making money at it, and eventually branched out into the other dorms nearby. So they had this going thing, and I used to help them a little bit with their game maintenance and whatnot. So after a couple years of being pretty successful at that and still being students, Doug and Kevin had a need for what was called back then an enhancement kit, which were kits you could buy if you were an arcade owner. You could buy a kit to plug into your game to speed it up, to make it better, more attractive to the gamer. Because the games, you would get a lot of revenue for a few months in your arcade, but then the pesky players got really good at it, and they would put in a quarter and play for long periods of times, and oftentimes they would find a flaw in the programming that you didn't know about, and would learn this. Asteroids was a famous one for that. We could talk about asteroid play styles. So these kits started to be made available to speed up the game. And Kevin and Doug had 3 Missile Command games, which was very popular at MIT in 1980.
Sure.
Nuclear war and explosions, and how are you going to relax from your studies? You're going to go and save a few cities. And so, and just like with the other games, so they got wonderful revenues, and then boom, the revenues dropped off as the players got really good. So they said, gee, there must be an enhancement kit for Missile Command. And they looked around and looked around, nobody had one. And then they thought, hey, we go to MIT. I bet we could make one. And so Kevin and Doug sort of formalized their company, and we couldn't come up with a better name, so we called it General Computer Company. By then we'd moved out of the dorm and were renting a house in Brookline, just across the river from Cambridge. And Kevin was there, and Doug was there, and I was in the house as well. And they started up this company called General Computer to build an enhancement kit for Missile Command. And so a handful of us, we started during spring break 1981, and off we went. And it was sort of fun. It was like a hack. It was better than doing your studies. And so in the span of about 6 weeks or so, we finished our first enhancement kit for Missile Command. And so that's how I really got started. And a kit for Pacman was the second thing that we really worked on seriously, and that's what turned into Ms. Pacman. So
Nice.
So that's what got me started. And then General Computer got extremely successful. I think we, at the peak in like 1984, we had 120 employees, and it got to be a really big deal. So for several years there, designing games was my life.
So I mean, at the time, you guys were college kids. You know,
Yes.
you were a sophomore, I think, at the time when you met Doug. And
I was a sophomore, and they came in as freshmen. They were one year behind me. That's right.
so I mean, as young college students, like at what point during all of this did you all decide, hey, this is it. This is our calling. We're going to go ahead and put all of our efforts into that.
I don't know if we ever did that. It was sort of like, well, this is fun for right now.
Right.
So this is really cool. Let's just keep going and keep doing this. And I was in my last year. I was supposed to graduate in 1981. Kevin and Doug were supposed to graduate. We all ended up dropping out because working on this game was just so much more fun, and it looked like this was going to be very successful. So off we went. And but I don't know if we ever looked at it as, oh, well, this is my career. It was sort of, this is my right now. And it was a real hoot.
Awesome.
It was fun for, while it lasted.
So obviously in your youth and just stress of life and everything, trying to create a successful product, business marketing, all that kind of stuff, what were some of the highs and lows that you guys endured as you're trying to make these games,
I think the highs were when you got your product finished and you could ship it, and starting to see it in an arcade. So boy, you knew it was real. And the lows are typical engineering. Oh, it's not working. I can't figure it out. How do I fix this particular problem? All the various lawsuits we went through. That was.
Could you tell us a little bit more about those? I've heard they've quite a couple, actually.
Yeah. So the first kit that we did, we called it an enhancement kit, was for Atari Missile Command. And you have to understand the industry at the time. There was a real problem with piracy of games. And the intellectual protection for games was not at all clear legally. It wasn't at all clear that a game had copyright protection, for example. And there were the wholesale piracy of games, of making a complete clone of a game and selling it cheaply was a real problem in the industry. Well, we didn't want to be a pirate. We wanted to do things legally, do things correctly. So we very carefully looked at how to build our kit, our Missile Command kit, which we called Super Missile Attack. How can we do this so that we're not violating copyright, trademark, intellectual property? And we thought we had done that. And we were really proud of that. Okay, we're not being a sleaze. We're doing this the right way. And we take out ads and we start selling. We sold about 1,000 kits altogether.
And at that point, had you got any legal counsel or advice at all?
Yes, a small amount. And actually, I think Kevin Curran had called Atari and talked to someone at Atari and said, we're about to do this. And whatever lawyer he talked to at Atari was like, yeah, sure, fine, whatever.
Wow.
So we thought we thought we were fine. And as I said, we sold about, the total sales was about 1,000 units. We made about $250 per unit. So there's $250,000 in the span of about 2 months.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Granted,
That
this was
like,
1981.
Yes, so that was serious money. And that was, wow, hey, maybe this isn't just a one-off hack. You could, maybe there's a living to be made here. And Kevin and Doug certainly looked at it that way. So What was your question again? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, just tell me more about the court cases
court
and stuff
cases.
like that.
So,
Yeah.
so all of a sudden, I think our success in the industry got Atari's attention. And whether it was Atari or whether it was Warner, but somebody at Atari said, oh, you have to understand Atari at this point is the king of consumer.
Yeah.
They are this phenomenal when you think high tech, you thought Atari. So to get their attention in a legal way was not a pleasant thought. And we heard through some contacts we had that Atari was taking a dim view of what we had done and were looking to sue us. And we actually sued them first, which meant that the lawsuit happened in Massachusetts, which was good for us. We didn't have to travel. But yeah, so they sued us for $15 million.
Wow.
And for copyright infringement and unfair trade practice. I thought that was the funniest one because they're this massive company making hundreds of millions of dollars and we're a handful of dropouts. And they took us to court. And I think they thought that we would just be so scared that we would, oh, we'll stop, and we would run away and stop. And we're like, no, heck, we'll go to court. What's so hard about that? So, I mean, we're college students. We're kind of arrogant. We can do this. We're pretty smart. And that's what we did. So we went to court and fought them.
Yeah, and how did that end now?
Well, initially it went against us. There was a TRO hearing, temporary restraining order, which went against us. And so we had to stop selling our kit. But it was a very limited ruling by the judge that you have to stop selling that version of the kit.
Yeah.
Leaving it open like, oh, okay, well, if we change it to address some of the issues that Atari brought up, then maybe we could start selling it again. So we did this massive engineering rush to come up with a second version of Super Missile Attack that changed everything that Atari complained about. I mean, things like, one of the things they complained about was the font. All right, 5x7 pixel, standard ASCII font. And Atari's like, well, when people see that font, they think Atari. Like, whatever, dude. We changed, so fine. So we quickly hacked up our own little font and changed it. Changed all the things they complained about. And said, here's our new version. And we so had that to show to the court. And they didn't like that one either. So so we got a preliminary injunction against us that said, okay, you have to stop selling this kit. All right. But now we're moving forward toward the actual trial, and this phase starts something called discovery. So in the discovery phase, you get to go and interview everybody on the opposing side.
Oh, nice.
So we started getting these interviews with all the engineers who worked on Missile Command. And they were saying things that sort of discounted some of the legal arguments. You know, Atari was saying things like, well, the arrangement of the 3 buttons is very specific and means, and the engineers are like, oh no, that's just functional because that's the shape of your fingers. Okay. You know, so little things like that. And apparently Ray Kassar, the president of Atari, he was upset that he had to be deposed, and his lawyers are like, Ray, we sued them. You have to show up for your deposition. And so it went on, and it started to look like we might have a case. It was sort of a compelling thing, and the PR was looking really bad for Atari. And finally, one time, one of the Atari people, in the midst of one of the depositions, they talked to Kevin and Doug. It's like, what do you guys want? And they said, we want to design arcade games. We're going to make money from these enhancement kits, and we're going to use that to fund our own development of arcade games. That's what we want to do. And the Atari guy's like, well, you could just do that for us. Okay, well, let's talk. And so that dropped the lawsuit and ended up with a development agreement between us and Atari, a 2-year development agreement. You have to understand that Atari really did not want to lose this lawsuit. This was sort of like, you know, if it had been proven in court that you were allowed to modify a game legally, that would set a really bad precedent, and they did not want that. So that was they really wanted to prevent
So
that from happening.
their offer must have been pretty compelling then for you guys.
Well, we wanted to design games.
Yeah.
And so here's this, the biggest game company in the world says, you can design games for us. And we're thinking, that's awesome. So they're going to do the manufacturing, they're going to do the sales and marketing, and all we have to do is the engineering design. Sign up for that all day long.
Very cool.
So yeah, so that was a great deal. So we were very happy. And I think they may not have realized how aggressively we would take on their deal of we started generating product for them. And they took it. So
Yeah. And so with everything you've done, all the kits and the games and program stuff, has anything ever brought you more of a celebrity status? Like people recognize you, or well, like us, we seek you out.
Now it's the work we did on Ms. Pacman.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was no celebrity at all. Right. We didn't care. General Computer, we did not really care.
Right.
If you look at the Activision guys, David Crane and whatnot, one of the reasons they left Atari, they wanted their name on the box. They wanted some recognition of the work that they had put in. They wanted to be treated like, remember, Atari is owned by Warner Communications, which also is a music publisher. Well, on your music album, it has the name of the artist who made the music, right? And David Crane is like, why isn't my name on the box? Because I created this game. And General Computer, we were like, we're getting paid. We don't care. You know, I don't need my name. I'm getting paid. That's fine. And so that was our attitude. So people in the industry certainly knew who we were. Eventually. Because for a while, nobody knew who we were. We were this just little secret outfit in Boston. And the fact that we were generating product for Atari was sort of not really known. But now, years later, there's this nostalgia for old games, 30-year-old games, and Ms. Pacman, and there's all these retro gaming conferences and get-togethers, and gee, they're all excited to have me and other gamers, old gamers, come and tell stories, and and so I come tottering in my walker, and
we enjoy it.
Yeah, we're just as excited to have you here too.
Talk about what it was like back then. So it's fun.
Speaking about what it was like back then, we were talking about you guys raising or selling and earning $250,000 at such a young age.
Yes.
But prior to that, in order to make these enhancement kits, you guys had to use a Genrad microprocessor in order to do that. And it was
emulator system.
Or the emulator, and it was about $25,000 to purchase that.
Yeah.
Where did the capital come from? And you guys, again, young college students.
Right. So Doug and Kevin had some money they had made from their arcade route. But mainly it was a loan from Doug's mom. So Doug called his mom, loan me money, and okay, here you go. And it was a good deal for her, I think. I'm sure she got paid back.
Yeah, and just to give you guys some insight, $25,000 at the time. If that were today, the equivalent would be just about $110,000.
Yes, something like that. It was a significant amount of money.
Significant amount of money.
Luckily, Doug had family connections and was able to
Very nice.
To make that happen. So that was the big expense initially to do the development, was this sophisticated computer system called a microprocessor emulator. And other than that, once we started our own manufacturing, you could sort of bootstrap that up, because you could order components and you had 60 days to pay. So you figure you're going to start getting your revenue. So that wasn't such a difficult thing. And the contracting out for who's going to make your circuit board and who's going to stuff it for you and all that. So the Genrad was the big expense. But then right away the revenue starts.
Absolutely. Seems like it paid off very well.
Yeah. So, we sold them for the list price for Super Missile Attack was $295, and it was about $30 worth of materials. So, which is pretty standard.
Wow.
Pretty standard back then for. So like, okay.
So now, tell us, what's your favorite game? We know that Ms. Pacman is your favorite arcade game, but across, board games, electronics, whatever.
So Ms. Pacman is my favorite arcade game because I made money off Ms. Pacman. As far as playing arcade games, I have to go with Robotron, I think.
Okay.
I didn't misspeak. I meant out of the Pac-Man family.
Oh, out of the
this Pac-Man was your favorite. No,
Yes.
I did want to know your favorite game
As
across
an arcade game, I think Robotron is just this incredibly compelling game, and I love playing it. I've got one in my basement, and I play that now and again when I. In there, and they bring this game off the assembly line, fresh off the assembly line, boom, put it in the conference room, and I've got my briefcase with my kit in it. Do I power up the game first to make sure it's working?
You would hope, but
No, because it's fresh off the assembly line. How could it not work? Okay, so and I go in and I start doing surgery on the thing, and I plug my little board in and do all this, and power it up, nothing, dead. Oh, jeez, I'm all alone in there. It's like no pressure, right?
Nope.
And I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? Try this, try this, try this. And it's a prototype. It's a hack. So it's like, all right, there's something wrong. And I test everything. I'm like, maybe the game isn't working. So I take all my stuff out, powered up, nothing. It's dead. Okay, so either I killed it or it didn't work to start with, fresh off the assembly line, right?
Jeez.
And Kevin and Doug telling me later they're in there like making small talk with Stan. They're like wondering what the hell is going on with Steve. And I have to go and tell him I need a second game.
I murdered this one.
All right, yeah, I murdered this one.
burn this one out here.
And they oh okay, and they go and they get a second one. And I tried this one first and like powered it up. Yeah, okay, this one's working. Install my kit. Boom, and up it comes.
Nice.
And we showed it off to them, and they brought in one of their guys off the shop floor who was a good Pac-Man player, and they brought him in, and he played arcade. He was like, yeah, okay, yeah, it looks pretty good. Yeah, okay, sounds like fun. So they got to see it, they got to play it, and that started the negotiations about what to, and that got them thinking, oh, we could buy this game. Midway thinking we'll just buy it from these guys, because Midway has this enormous hit, Pac-Man. That was designed by Namco in Japan. Midway is just the licensee in the Western Hemisphere. All right, they did no development on the game to speak of. Certainly do the marketing and the manufacturing. So they're waiting for the next game to come from Namco. Hey guys, where's the next game? And apparently Namco had been talking about something called Super Pac-Man, some sort of a follow-on, and it didn't. It never happened. It never showed up. So when we were at Midway, they said, hey, why don't we show you? Showed us here. We'll show you the next game we're about to do, Bosconians. Who remembers Bosconians? So they showed it to us. We were like, yeah, fine. So Midway was desperate for another game. And here was a game that just got dumped on them for free. They could keep the manufacturing essentially the same, because it's a Pac-Man with a second little board plugged in that I designed. I did the hardware for it, because remember, we were going to sell it to arcade owners who have a Pac-Man cabinet, so it's designed as a little board that you just plug in. I jokingly call it now the Pac-Man sex change kit. Plug it in, and it makes it Miss Pac-Man. So, so I think they were a little like waiting for Namco to provide them the next big thing, and it didn't happen. And here, boom, it shows up magically from Boston on the plane. Here's something you could build. So Namco works a deal with us, and Midway works the deal with us. Midway also talks to Namco and says, hey, Namco, we're about to do this follow-on game that we developed. Right.
Yeah,
that we acquired.
Yeah.
They developed.
And so Namco knew about this kit right from the start, and they had some influence in the Ms. Pac-Man character and what the Ms. Pac-Man character looked like. Recall originally it was Crazy Otto.
Yeah.
But as soon as we got in with Midway, we can call it Pac-Man. It was going to be Super Pac-Man, and then no, it's going to be Pac-Woman, Miss Pac-Man, make the female character the main character. So there was back and forth with Namco. They knew about this right from the start. I don't think they thought it would be as successful as it was. I think Namco probably thought, yeah, they'll sell a few thousand. What's the big deal? Keep Midway happy for a while. But it turned into this monster huge hit.
Nice.
And overshadowed Pac-Man in some ways. And it was certainly way more successful than we thought it would be.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think maybe they look back on it and Namco might say, gee, why did we agree to put up with that? But I don't know. I haven't talked to them in quite a while. And then we had the whole arbitration thing where they started making the games again. And we had to call them up and remind them. Yeah, that's another part of the story there.
Thanks, they did the reminder work.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what matters.
Well, I think because it was 20 years later. Yeah. Everybody who remembered how this Pac-Man actually came about was long gone. And they sort of, I think the Namco memory, internal memory, and certainly Namco, Bandai Namco in the U.S. was, oh yeah, that's a Namco game. That's our game.
But that's all they remembered. Huh?
That's all they remembered. And it's Pac-Man. It's part of the Pac-Man family. It's our game. Yep, sure, no problem. And then they started making the cabinets again, and so we had to call them up and we had to fax them the contract. Remember this contract we signed? And this agreement, and you owe us. And so what we were owed and how much led to arbitration. And,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So, do you have any suggestions for young entrepreneurs or people who want to get started in game design who might have been in the same spot you were in back then?
Wow. Yes, do it. It's fun. Games are fun. Work in the gaming industry. It's very different. Back then, a small group of people could do game development. The difficulty was in the sales and marketing. And nowadays, you look at how the gaming industry has just exploded into these massive teams that are required to develop hundreds of millions of dollars and hundreds of people to make one of the modern games. And so it's not something that one person can do, but you could do a game for your phone, all right? I mean, that's what's approachable right now. Gee, if you were really clever, you could do Angry Birds, right? Or, but it's fun to do, at least. So I would say absolutely. And I talk to students who are in college to get a degree in game design, which just totally blows my mind that that's available now. Yeah. And they're all excited about being part of this massive industry. And it's like, yeah, games are fun. Absolutely, do it. And, how can this be a bad thing?
Yeah.
So that's my advice. It's like, absolutely, yeah, do it. And play more.
Well, Steve, we're running out of time, but
yeah.
Thank you so much for sitting and talking with us today, and we really appreciate your time and all your efforts.
Happy to do it.
So,
happy to do it.
One thing we'd like to give you that we snuck in here, you already noticed the holder for it. Just so you guys at home, is a little Miss Pac-Man holder.
Oh, look at that.
But this coin, if you'll flip it over,
yes,
we had it specially engraved for you.
Kids. And on the back, oh, you're a hero, Steve. Thank you.
And there's a little Pac-Man and Pac-Woman in there too.
Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness. Okay, that's awesome.
Thanks again.
Custom designed by a member from our team using their nice fancy laser they got in.
Is that right? Because you need something to lasers. You need something to do with your lasers. So that's very cool.
So thank you again.
Absolutely.
Goodbye to all you viewers at home.
Goodbye.
Play more games. Take care. Are we done?
Yep.
Fade it out. How'd we do? Did we get through all your questions?
We did.